Okay, this is the first of our many installments of videos for angles. And today, this video is going to be mostly focused on just the vocabulary in angles, the different types of angles, and how to identify them. So these are the terms we're going to talk about today: acute, obtuse, right, straight, zero, vertical, supplementary, complementary, and linear pair. So let's get into it. We'll talk about the first three. A right angle, as you've probably been aware, is a 90-degree angle. It's like the corner of a square or corner of a rectangle. And we'll talk about how to measure angles in the next video, but a right angle is a 90-degree angle. An acute angle is between 0 and 90. So anywhere from down here, and let me actually ungroup these, show you what I mean. So anywhere, this would be a really small angle, like, 3 or 4 degrees, to here, which would be about 89 degrees. So anywhere between 0 and 90, these are acute. And then obtuse, they're bigger than 90, so anywhere between 90 and 180. So anywhere from here to here, but not including 90 and 180. So those are obtuse angles. All right. Zero angles and straight angles, these are often confused for one another. And they're kind of hard to identify which one's which. Hopefully I can help clarify that here. So a zero angle is an angle that measures 0 degrees. So an example would be angle CAB. Angle CAB. And the reason is, if you go from C to A, that's your vertex, and then back to B, you don't open up at all. So that would be 0 degrees. And I've got a little diagram here I'll show you in a second. A straight angle would be angle CBA. You start at C, your vertex is B, and you open up all the way to A, so it's a complete 180-degree angle. So that's a straight angle. So let's take a look at this diagram here. And what I have is I've got a 0-degree angle here. I'm just going to open it up, and you can see right down here the angle measure. You can also see it over here. And so if the angle starts at one point, goes to the vertex, and then basically comes back on top of itself, that's 0 degrees. You can see this really tiny one's 1 degree. And so as it comes back on top of itself, it's going to be 0 degrees. And then if we open up to 180, that's going to be like a straight line. That's going to be, whoops, there we go. It looks, just the same, but this time the way you label the letters affects if it's 0 or 180. So that's the difference. One is when it goes right on top of itself, back to where it started from, and the other is when it ends up on the opposite side. Okay, hopefully that helped to clarify those two a little bit. So that's zero and straight angles. Now we're going to talk about vertical angles. And vertical angles are whenever you have something like this where you've got an X with two lines that cross, or two segments that cross, something like that. The angles right across from each other, we'll call this angle 1 and this angle 2. These are vertical angles. And what's special about vertical angles is they're always congruent. And congruent, it means they're the same. They're the same angle measure, the same size. So these vertical angles are always congruent. So 1 and 2 are going to be congruent. And then 3 and 4, we'll call this one 3 and this one 4. These are also going to be congruent. So angle 1, this symbol is congruent to angle 2, and angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. And so hopefully you're kind of asking yourself, well, why? So let's just pick an angle. Let's say this one looks like it's about 80 degrees. We'll pick a nice number that's easy to add and subtract. So if we focus on this line right here, these two angles, one here and one here, they form a straight line. So that's a straight angle, that's 180 degrees. So this angle 4 then would have to make this 180 plus this to equal 180. So 100 plus 80 equals 180. So this one's got to be 100. And then likewise, if we focus on this line, these two have to add up to 180 because they form a nice line. So that means this has to be 100. And then same thing, if we focus on this red line again, well, I'll do it in green this time. This green line, now we're kind of looking at this half. And so if this is 100, this down here has to be 80 because we have what's called a linear pair. We'll get into that in the next slide. So vertical angles are always going to be congruent, the ones right across from each other when they form an X. Okay, and that's huge. You're going to be using that a lot over the next couple months. Okay, and then the last three terms that we're going to talk about for this video are complementary angles, supplementary angles, and linear pair, and I alluded to these earlier. So complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. It's two angles, only two angles, that add up to 90 degrees. So this is the other key part. So you could have, we could have something like a 90-degree angle, like this, and we just cut it into two angles. This would be angle 1 and angle 2. Those are complementary. You could also have one that, like this is 30 degrees, and this one's 60 degrees. They don't have to be connected. These are complementary because when you add 30 and 60, you get 90. So those are two examples of complementary angles, and this would be a right angle here. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180. So once again, it's only two angles, and this time they add up to 180. So same thing, you could have two that form a line, and this might be 50 degrees, and this one would be 130. Those two are supplementary because they add up to 180. And I forgot my arrows here. Or you could have just two angles that are not connected. So this one looks like it's about 110. So then you'd have to find one that's 70. And those two are supplementary because they add up to 180. Okay, a linear pair, these are like supplementary angles. In fact, all linear pair angles are supplementary, so they add up to 180. What this means, though, is that when you put them together, they form a line. So, and I shouldn't have said that. It's not when you put them together. It's that they do form a line when they're like a linear pair. So these two are not a linear pair. This example, the 110 and the 70, because they do not form a nice straight line. But these two are a linear pair because they cut this line in two parts. So linear pair would be an example like this, where you've got two angles. We'll call this angle 3 and this angle 4, where they make a nice line. Okay, so this is the first installment of our videos on angles. The next one will show you how to measure an angle using a protractor, and it'll also show you how to create an angle. Say you want to make a 115-degree angle or something, how to do that with a protractor as well.